Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're looking at something practically all of us have spent years of our lives experiencing, but let's be honest, we rarely ever think about it. We're going to explore this fascinating idea that education isn't just some random assortment of facts thrown together. No, it is carefully and sometimes fiercely architected.
Seriously, think back to your own school days for a second. Who actually decided what you learned? Like, why did you study fractions before algebra? Why were you assigned that one specific history textbook? It's so easy to just assume this knowledge exists in the ether and naturally finds its way into a classroom. But in reality, every single thing you learned was the result of incredibly deliberate decisions made by educational architects.
And you can really see the sheer chaos of expectations that society drops onto a single student right here. I mean, we expect our educational system to somehow perfectly instill ethics, moral education, and religious education. But wait, there's more. We also need drug prevention, road safety, national unity, racial tolerance, citizenship. Oh, and don't forget preparing kids for globalization, the knowledge economy, science, tech, and environmental awareness. It is literally a massive, overwhelming pile of demands. And highlighting this brings us to the core problem curriculum planners face. How on earth do we actually organize all this chaos?
Well, the answer is curriculum development. This is the essential blueprint. It's a comprehensive plan for ordering and directing the teaching and learning experiences of students. It encompasses planning out the big goals, designing the structure, implementing it in reality, and, crucially, evaluating if it actually worked. Think of it as the invisible engine keeping the whole institution running smoothly, constantly striving to find newer, better, and more efficient ways to educate the next generation.
All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the curriculum blueprint itself. Second, the Tyler model. Third, the grassroots approach. And finally, we'll wrap up by comparing who actually builds the curriculum.
Starting off with Section 1, the curriculum blueprint, building the foundation. We're going to use an overarching analogy here. Basically, building a curriculum is exactly like drafting a structural blueprint.
Just like a building needs a blueprint to stand strong, schools absolutely need a curriculum to guide the teaching and learning process efficiently. Without this invisible architecture, an educational institution simply cannot function. The curriculum is the absolute foundation. I mean, it determines what textbooks are used, how teachers get trained, what instructional development looks like, and how students are evaluated. It sets the standards. If you don't have a solid plan to direct these experiences, the entire structure of the school just collapses back into that chaos of societal demands we were talking about earlier.
Moving on to Section 2, the Tyler model, the classic engineer. So, who drafts these blueprints? Let's introduce the first of our two architects, Ralph Tyler. Back in his classic 1949 book, Basic Principles of Curriculum and Instruction, Tyler laid out a highly structured, almost engineering-like approach to education.
Now, Tyler's entire philosophy really just boils down to four fundamental questions. I want to walk you through these because they provide a deeply logical step-by-step sequence. Number one, what educational purposes or objectives should the school seek to attain? Number two, what educational experiences can actually be provided to reach those objectives? Number three, how do we organize those experiences effectively? And finally, number four, how do we determine whether these purposes are actually being met? It is a highly rational cause and effect sequence, right? Identify the goal, select the means, organize the means, and evaluate the outcome.
This brilliantly illustrates the linear nature of Tyler's mind. You can see how you start out with raw sources, society, subject matter, and the learner. Information from those sources flows directly into tentative objectives. But you don't stop there. Notice the straight, unbroken progression traveling logically through specific screens. This results in instructional objectives, which then dictate the learning experiences, how they're organized, and everything finally ends at evaluation.
Let's zoom in on the mechanics of Tyler's blueprint, specifically that middle filtering section. Tyler argued that the raw objectives you gather from society or subject matter, well, they're just too broad. They absolutely have to be filtered. So he created two rigid screens, a philosophy screen and a psychology screen. Essentially, only the objectives that perfectly align with the school's educational philosophy and make sense according to the psychology of human learning actually make it through. The final result? Highly specific, observable, and measurable instructional outcomes. It is a top-down, incredibly organized filtering system designed by educational engineers.
Which brings us to Section 3, the grassroots approach, the TABA model. Because, as you might guess, not everyone agreed that a rigid, top-down engineering approach was the best way to educate human beings. Let's shift gears and meet our second architect, Hilda Taba. She published her revolutionary alternative in 1962.
The absolute crucial point here is Taba's core philosophy.
Teachers who teach the curriculum should participate in developing it. She fundamentally disagreed with just handing teachers a blueprint designed by administrators or outside experts. She believed that the people actually swinging the hammers, the teachers in the classrooms, they should be the ones drafting the blueprint. And that is exactly why her strategy is famously known as the grassroots model.
When you look at Taba's 7-step grassroots model in action, something immediately stands out: the prominent placement of teacher input right at the very top and then again at the bottom. This is not a factory line. Instead, it's a deeply involved process where the teacher is the primary curriculum designer. They drive this entire 7-step cycle that starts and ends with their direct involvement with the students.
Let's detail this sequence a bit more, because it operates entirely differently from Tyler's method. It's an inductive sequence. Step 1 is strictly the diagnosis of needs. The teacher starts by looking at the specific students sitting right in front of them. What do they need? Let's say a teacher diagnoses that the majority of their students are struggling with critical thinking. Boom, that becomes the foundation. Only after diagnosing that specific immediate need does the teacher move to step 2, formulating objectives to fix that exact deficiency. And then step 3, selecting content that is valid and significant enough to meet those newly formed objectives. It literally builds upward from the classroom floor.
And that brings us to section 4. Who builds the curriculum? Tyler versus Taba. Now we're bringing both of our architects together for a final showdown. Let's really see how these two different blueprints fundamentally alter the educational landscape. When you actually compare them side by side, the contrast is just fascinating. On one hand, we have the rigid top-down engineering of Ralph Tyler. It's a completely deductive model. You start massive, looking at the broad needs of society and overarching philosophies, and you deduce your way down to the individual classroom. It's highly linear. But then on the other hand, you have the grassroots revolution of Hilda Taba. This is an inductive model. You start small, right at the bottom, diagnosing the specific student needs in a single classroom. And from there, you build the curriculum upward, led entirely by the teacher's on-the-ground insights.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. Think back, again, to your own education. Can you spot the invisible architecture that shaped your mind? Did your school experience feel more like the Tyler model, a highly linear, top-down system engineered to turn you into a specific product for society? Or did it feel like the Taba model, an organic, grassroots experience built dynamically by your teachers responding to what you actually needed in that very moment? You see, understanding these blueprints doesn't just explain how schools work, it literally explains how we became the thinkers we are today. So keep looking for those blueprints.